visiting amarpathshala.com. In today's lecture, we will discuss about the respiratory system. Now, the respiratory system is a system that allows living beings to respire. This is part 1 of the lecture. And in this lecture, we will begin by discussing the respiration in simple organisms, and eventually we will dig into the respiratory system of human beings, which is our main topic. So let's begin. So, why do we breathe? Why do we need a respiratory system? Why is breathing an important thing within every living being? We need to breathe. We need a system that allows us to breathe because our cells need to respire. That is, in order for our cells to grow, in order for our cells to multiply, and in order for our cells to perform any matter of function, it needs energy. And this energy is provided by respiration. And respiration is the process with which gases from the environment is used up to break down the food molecules that are present in the cells of every living being. Now, whenever I think about respiration, the term respiration, 2 things come to my mind. What exactly does respiration mean? And what is the difference between breathing and respiration? See, this is something that you guys need to understand properly before you go on for any examination or before you go on for any kind of discussion about breathing and respiration. Breathing is the process through which we take air in. There are 2 mechanisms, inspiration and expiration. Inspiration is the process through which we take air in from the environment, and expiration is the process through which we release air within ourselves on the environment. As you can see in this slide here, breathing involves 2 basic processes, inspiration and expiration. Inspiration can also be said, a synonym for inspiration is inhalation. And therefore, as you can assume, that a synonym for expiration is exhalation. So if we move on to the slide, we can see that in expiration, air moves from the lungs to the external environment, and therefore in inspiration, air moves from the external environment to inside of the body. See, there are subdivisions to these processes as well. As you can see, external respiration is the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the air and blood. And internal respiration is the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the body's tissue cells and the blood. These things, the external respiration and internal respiration, will be further explained in gas exchange of this chapter. And then we have cellular respiration, which is the basic difference between breathing and respiration. See, breathing is inspiration and expiration, and respiration is mainly cellular respiration, wherein the energy releasing chemical reaction that takes place inside the cells, and these energy releasing chemical reactions use up the oxygen that we inspire in and combines them or reacts them with the food molecules to provide energy, which we use for our everyday metabolic purposes. So cellular respiration is the final stage in the respiration. It is the sole means of providing energy for all cellular activities, and it helps the body maintain homeostasis. Moving on, gas exchange by diffusion. See, when it comes to simpler organisms, for example, as you can see, a flatworm here, a jellyfish here, these are very simple organisms. They don't have complicated systems guiding their functions. In case of their respiration, what happens is air moves in and out of their bodies through diffusion, because their bodies are so simple and their body walls are so thin. So you see, gases simply diffuse through their skins. And since gases can diffuse in and out and their systems are so simple, their metabolic rates, i.e. their activities, their functions are far more simpler and lower than that of higher organisms like, say, human beings or animals, etc. So them having a simple body structure and them having thin walls allows them to allows gases to diffuse into and out of them efficiently. Therefore, they have a low metabolic rate, and they are all these organisms who allows gases to just get into and out of their body via diffusion usually tend to be aquatic. Why? Because aquatic animals, because in an aquatic environment, gases get that moist or wet or that medium, that slippery medium or the moist medium through which they can easily diffuse in and out. This is one important aspect of a respiratory system, guys, that you should take notice of. You might be asked in any questions or anywhere that what are the two most important aspects of a respiratory system? Well, the two most important ones are that a respiratory system surface has to be extremely thin. Why? So that gases can efficiently diffuse in and out. And the other thing is they have to have some moisture. They need some slippery or some moisture above them, because these gases, they need a moist surface to diffuse in and out. As a result, these simple organisms that allows their respiration, or they perform their respiration chiefly by diffusion, are all aquatic animals. Then we have another aquatic animal that does not respire by diffusion, but they have specialized structure within them that helps this process through. That aquatic animal are fishes. So you see, fishes have specialized structure within their head region. Those specialized structures are what we know as gills. As you can see in the diagram, this is a cross-section of a fish gill. You can see that this is a bony flap known as the operculum, and this bony flap supports the gills. And you see these thin folds of tissue, these red thin folds of tissue. These tissues allows air from the water to diffuse into the body of the fish as it swims through. These thin folds of tissue are very much networked with blood capillaries. Therefore, whenever oxygen gas seeps in from the water into the gills, they pass directly into the blood capillaries and into the system of the fish. Gills of aquatic animals, therefore, of complex aquatic animals, therefore, are those appendages or are those structures that allows breathing to happen efficiently. And in case of terrestrial animals, terrestrial meaning those live in lands, that does not have a complicated respiratory system, they don't have gills. They have spirogills, which are basically holes, sort of holes inside on their body, which allows gases to pass into their system. And then, in case of most complex animals on Earth, we have lungs, the most common respiratory organ of most terrestrial vertebrates. And these lungs are found in all animals, including human beings, and the lungs and other respiratory organs are the key component of our discussion in this chapter. Now, before we delve into the human respiratory system, let us finish our discussion on fish gills. As you can see in this slide, fish gills increase gas exchange efficiency using countercurrent exchange. Countercurrent exchange is where water flow and blood flow are happening in a counter or in opposite ways. Running blood through the system in the opposite direction to the water keeps a diffusion gradient through the entire exchange, which means that if blood is running in this direction and water is running in this direction, this allows diffusion of respiratory gases to happen more efficiently. And in fish gills, this mechanism is performed in a very efficient manner. As a result, fish gills allows fishes to respire properly. Now, what are the functions of a respiratory system? The respiratory system allows animals to move oxygen, which is needed for the breakdown of food materials to provide cellular energy into body tissues, and remove carbon dioxide, which is essentially a waste gas when it comes to our body cells. This is, guys, the chief important function of a respiratory system. Now, as I have been saying so far, that our main topic of discussion is the human respiratory system. So let's see what are the components of a human respiratory system. As you can see in the diagram, this is the human respiratory system. We begin with the nose or the nasal pathway. This is the passageway for air to get in. Air can also get in through our mouth. As we go down, we find the epiglottis. Epiglottis is an important structure, you guys. It is a flap of muscle that falls flat on the windpipe when we swallow. So therefore, epiglottis helps food to pass through our mouth into our food pipe without causing any disturbance to our windpipe. Otherwise, if a little droplet of food or water got into our windpipe, we will have difficulty in breathing, and it may also destroy the structure of the windpipe or the lungs. An example of that phenomenon is when you accidentally swallow a little bit of spit or a little bit of water. You cough violently until your body expels that water out of your windpipe. Then we have the larynx, or our voice box. Now the larynx is a combination of flap of different muscles that allows us to speak by vibration. So right now, as I'm speaking, the muscles in my larynx are vibrating in my unique pattern, allowing me to speak, allowing me to talk, and the sound is allowing you guys to listen. If you want to feel that vibration, sometimes put your fingers on your throat like this, and you can feel the thin hum of vibration of those muscles. Then we have the trachea, or the windpipe, which I have discussed while talking about epiglottis. The trachea is the main airway, which is supported by C-shaped rings of cartilage. Now these cartilages keeps the trachea pushed open. Since it's a flap of muscles, it is very likely that when it's not being used, or when it's not having something pass through it, it will collapse on itself. Now, when it comes to respiratory system, a collapsed tube can be a huge problem, as air will not pass through. And if air does not pass through, we will not be able to respire properly now, would we? So that passageway has to be kept open by something, a clip of some sort. And that clip are the C-shaped rings of cartilage. As you can see, the little round structures here. Now, when the trachea goes down, as it reaches the lungs, it divides into two branches. Those branches are known as bronchi. Plural is bronchi and singular is bronchus. And these two bronchi then gets inside the lungs. Inside the lungs, these bronchi divides into further many more branches known as bronchioles, as you can see right here, that this is a section of the right lung and the left lung is kept intact. This is to show you guys that how the insides of a lung look when you cut it open, and this is to show you guys that what a lung looks from the outside. So, as you can see in the right lung, that the bronchi gets in and then it starts dividing into many more branches. And on each of those branches, there is a small pouch-like structure known as the alveoli or air sacs. Alveoli is plural and alveolus is singular. So alveoli or the air sacs are the chief sites of gas exchange. And then the supporting structure in case of respiratory system, we have the nasal cavity, which filters, warms, and moistens the air. We have been saying over and over again, dry air getting in our system will be difficult to pass through because most of our system is composed of water. If the air is warmed, if the air is moistened, it will not be able to diffuse through our cells properly. Now then we have the pharynx or the throat, which is the common passageway for air, food, liquid, etc. And then we have discussed trachea and its importance. We have discussed bronchi or the branching airways and their importance. We have just now discussed alveoli or the air sacs and their importance. And then we have a membrane. This membrane is known as the pleural membrane. As I have said before, the respiratory system in each living organism has to have a thin and a moist covering so that gases can pass in and out properly. And this membrane, the pleural membrane, is one that covers the lungs and lines the chest cavity. And inside the pleural membrane, we can find, if we could dissect, if we could separate a lung from a living organism, and if we could dissect the surface of the lung, we will see that inside the pleural membrane, there is a fluid, also known as the pleural fluid, that moistens the surface of the lung. The lung, as I have been saying till now, is the chief organ of the gas exchange or the chief respiratory organ. And then surrounding or covering the lung are bones known as a cage, a support, a structure of bone known as the rib cage. The rib cage is sort of how a house protects its inhabitants. Rib cage protects the lungs and the heart from mechanical damage. So each time we lie down or we strike to some hard surface or we get pushed, our lungs and our hearts are safe because it is being protected by a bony cage by a cage of bone known as the rib cage. Now, rib cage is not all bone. Rib cage is also bones and cartilage. Now, imagine this. Lung is a complete muscly structure. And lung is like a balloon. It always has to inflate and deflate, meaning as air goes inside the lung, it has to grow in size. And then it has to deflate or shrink in its original size as air comes out. Now, if you put a balloon into a tight steel cage and you pull and you put in air inside of it, it will not be able to inflate or deflate to its maximum capacity now, would it? No. So this cage that you have put the balloon in, it has to allow the balloon to move to its independence. And in case of our rib cage, how does that happen? Because lungs definitely move to their maximum capacity each and every time we inhale and exhale. Well guys, this is done by these muscles known as the intercostal muscles. These muscles move ribs during inhalation and exhalation. And how this happens is something we will discuss right after. This is something that we will discuss right after we finish discussing this slide. And then, last but not the least, is what we have known as the diaphragm. The diaphragm is also a sheet of muscles. When relaxed, the diaphragm has a bent dome-shaped structure, like a dome, like this kind of. When relaxed, it is like this, and it separates the thoracic cavity or the chest cavity from our abdominal cavity, which are stomach and etc. And diaphragm is kind of what the floor of your house. That is what diaphragm is to the lungs and the respiratory system. Now, as you can see in this slide, these are the important structures for our respiratory system. The nose or the nasal cavity warms and moistens the air. The pharynx is the passageway for air which leads to the trachea. The larynx is the voice box where the vocal cords are located. Trachea or the windpipe keeps the trachea or the windpipe is where air passes through and into the lungs, and the cartilages in these windpipe keep them open. And the trachea is lined by hairs, minute microscopic hairs called cilia, which filter the air, as in these cilia beat away dust particles or dirt particles that are present in the air so that only pure air gets into the lungs. Then we have bronchi. These are two branches at the end of the trachea, each leading to one lung. Then we have bronchioles, which are networks of smaller branches leading from the bronchi into the lung tissue and ultimately to the air sacs. And finally, we have alveoli, which are the functional respiratory units. As in, these are the sites, you guys, where basically air from environment passes into our system, and then carbon dioxide or gas, excretory respiratory gases from our system passes out and into the environment. So, if we were to ask a question that gills are the site of the gaseous exchange in fishes, what is the site of gaseous exchange in mammals? Could you answer that question for me? Well, in this case, the answer would be alveoli. Alveoli are the site of the gaseous exchange in case of mammals. Now, we have discussed the respiratory system. We have seen how it looks. We have also studied or learned a few important factors few important structures of the respiratory system. Now, let's see what breathing in and breathing out looks like. Now, this diagram shows you the mechanism of moving air in and out, also known as inhalation and exhalation. Now, guys, I want you to pay attention to me while I explain this to you, because there are a composition of complex thing happening here. So, we begin with the first diagram, which is the relaxed state. As you can see, in the relaxed state, the external intercostal muscle, the pink flap of muscle on top of the rib cages, they relax and sort of covering the rib cage. And in here, through the ribs, you can see the red flap or the bent dome-shaped diaphragm. When no movement of air is happening, this is how our lungs and our rib cage looks like. Now, imagine what happens when you're breathing in. Let us breathe in. So what did we feel when we breathed in? So we felt like, I felt that my rib cage sort of moved up and my chest cavity kind of puffed up. So let us explain what is happening here. When air flows in, ribs move upward and outward due to muscle contraction. So like I just said, when air is moving in, ribs are moving upward and outward, giving me right now and you guys as well a sort of a puffed up of our chest experience, and that happens because of the contraction of these intercostal muscles. Now, as this happens, what happens within our lung is that the lung volume increases, as in the lung sort of increases in size. It's the same as blowing air through a balloon. The balloon increases in size as air gets in. So the lungs increases in size and air gets inside. And as a result, the diaphragm contracts. Now, I have mentioned before that on its relaxed state, the diaphragm is a dome-shaped structure. So when it contracts, it kind of straightens up, like it is like this when it relaxes, and when it contracts, it kind of becomes like this. So all of this combined together increases our chest cavity. As the chest cavity is increased, air can efficiently move from outside to inside. And then what happens during expiration? See, this, what I discussed and described just now, is what happens step by step when inspiration is taking place. But what happens during expiration? Exactly the opposite. So we started with the muscles of the rib contracting and the rib cage moving upward and outward. So that happened in inspiration. So in expiration, what we have is the muscles relax and the ribs, they return to their original resting position like it was before. As a result of which, the chest cavity that we had so puffed up earlier now slightly decreases. And as this happens, the lungs also decreases in size, i.e. they deflate. And as that happens, air is pushed out or flows out of the chest cavity or out of the lungs through our nose. Air got inside of our lungs through our nose, so it's natural that air will come out of the lungs through our nose. And therefore, as air flows out of the lung through our nose, the diaphragm then relaxes. And as it relaxes, it changes back into its original dome shape. So, as if you look into the diagrams again, you see that this is the relaxed state when no air movement is happening. And in the second diagram, in the second figure, you see that air is flowing in, lung volume is increasing, causing air pressure to fall. We know, if you have studied pressure, we know that pressure and volume are inversely proportional to each other, i.e., if pressure increases, volume decreases. So, air pressure falls and lung volume increases. And air flows in, causing the diaphragm, pushing the diaphragm, and the diaphragm contracts. And when air is coming out of the lungs, the opposite thing happens is that the lung volume decreases and air flows out and the diaphragm relaxes and it goes back to its original bend shape. So during inspiration, diaphragm and the intercostal muscle contract, and during exhalation, these muscles relax and the diaphragm's dome shape comes to its original structure or its original shape. Now, In the following slide, what we have here is a typical spirograph. What is a spirograph? A spirograph is a graph that measures the volume of air that is breathed in and out, or the amount of air that is left inside our lungs. So as you can see that in this graph, in this y-axis, you have the volume of air, total volume of air in the lungs, and this is the respiration measured in seconds, and you have time in the x-axis. As you can see that this volume of air is known as the tidal volume. That is, that this volume of air is the common volume of air that is present in our lungs as we breathe in and breathe out. So tidal volume is the volume of air that is present in our lungs as we breathe in and out. And when we inspire, when we take air in, this volume suddenly increases. And this sudden increase in the volume of air is known as the inspiratory reserve volume. And then when we expire air out of our lungs, there is a sudden fall in the volume of air inside the lungs. This sudden fall in volume is known as the expiratory reserve volume. And the little amount of air that is left in the lungs apart, even though expiration has happened, is known as the residual volume. Now guys, why is that remaining air important? It is because since lung is also since lung is chiefly muscle, it has to be kept in its original shape, otherwise it will collapse on itself. In case of trachea, we have rings of cartilage, but if we had cartilage around our lungs will not move, and if lungs would not move, then you wouldn't be able to inspire properly. As a result, even if we forcefully expire, there's always a little bit of air that is left inside our lung, which is known as the residual volume, and which is what you can see inside this graph. This little volume, this amount of air, is what is known as the residual volume. Now the tidal volume, which is the volume of air that is inside our respiratory system even as we breathe in and out. The tidal volume and the inspiratory reserve volume, that is the amount or the sudden increase in the volume of air as we inspire in, total makes up the inspiratory capacity. And the expiratory reserve volume, that is the amount of air that we breathe out plus the little volume of air that stays in so that the lungs do not collapse, is known as the functional residual capacity. If you have any problem of understanding, I will repeat again. We begin with the tidal volume, which is the normal amount of air that is present in our respiratory system. And then when we inspire, that is when we breathe in, that amount of air suddenly increases. And that increase in volume of air is known as the inspiratory reserve volume. Now, when we breathe out, when we expire, that amount of air, the volume of air suddenly falls, and the sudden fall in the volume of air, this breathed out air, is known as the expiratory reserve volume. But even after we breathe out, some volume of air has to be left inside so that the lung does not collapse on itself, and that volume is known as the residual volume. This is one part of the graph. Now, on the second part of the spirograph, the tidal volume, which is the amount inside our lungs, inside our respiratory system, plus the inspired volume of air, is known as the inspiratory capacity. And then the expired air, or the breathed out air, plus the residual volume that was there so that the lung does not collapse on itself is known as the functional residual capacity. Now, the third part of the spirograph, inspiratory capacity, tidal volume, and expiratory reserve volume in total makes up the vital capacity of the lung. So, if you face a question or if you were asked that what is the vital capacity of our lung, you say that the inspiratory reserve volume, the tidal volume, and the expiratory reserve volume, that is the air we breathe in, the air that is always the air that always stays in, and the air that we breathe out, in total makes up the vital capacity. Or vital capacity of our lungs is the amount of air which we can forcefully breathe in or out, minus the air that always stays inside, which is the residual volume. And all of this, inspiratory reserve volume, tidal capacity, expiratory reserve volume, and residual volume, this totally makes up, in total, makes up the total volume of lung. So guys, this was the part 1 of the respiratory system. In this part, we discussed what respiratory system means, its functions, respiratory system in simple organism, and then we began our discussion on human respiratory system. And until the next part comes along, have a nice day.